Welcome back to this live edition of In the Spotlight. 2 hours of election night coverage here. Super Tuesday. The polls in Ohio have closed. They may have closed in some other states, and we'll be getting some results as they come in. 575-0403 if you want in on our conversation. Who did you vote for today and why? We'd like to hear from you. And who do you plan to vote for in November? John Kerry for the Democrats, George Bush for the Republicans, maybe Ralph Nader if he is on the Ohio ballot. But first, there's a race for U.S. Senate here in Ohio. Former Congressman Eric Fingerhut is joining us now. He is the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate against George Voinovich this November. Now, I might add, we did extend an invitation to Senator George Voinovich to participate in our broadcast tonight, either live here in person or via telephone. The senator is in Washington tonight. We also invited a surrogate for Senator Voinovich to participate. The Voinovich campaign declined our invitation. So joining us here live in studio is Eric Fingerhut, state senator from the east side of Cuyahoga County. Senator, welcome to the broadcast.
Thanks for having me.
575-0403 is the number to call. Senator, again, welcome. First of all, it has to be a pretty tall order to take out George Voinovich. How are you going to do it?
Well, I just finished a 10-day, 45-county bus tour around Ohio. And what I understand is that people know that it's time for a change. They have respect for Senator Voinovich, as I do. They believe he's a sincere man, as I do, and they even agree with him on some issues, as I do. But they know that the single most important question is, how do we get Ohio moving again? How do we make Ohio competitive, great again in the 21st century? And his policies and his ideas are just simply the policies of the past. They're not working anymore. The average income of Ohioans over the last 15 years since he was governor and U.S. senator has declined. We used to be 5% above the national average. Today we're 5% below. What that means is there are good jobs being created somewhere in America, just not here in Ohio. So people are looking for new ideas, for a fresh approach, for someone who thinks they know how to lead us into the 21st century. And so what I believe my task is, it certainly is an uphill battle because they know Senator Voinovich, but they're looking for an alternative. My job is to show them what the alternative is, and that's what I'm about doing every single day of the week.
Senator, there's a issue on the floor in Washington about same-sex marriage. An amendment to the Constitution. The president last week came out in favor of such an amendment. Senator Voinovich has expressed, I believe, his interest in this issue. Senator, how do you feel about an amendment to the Constitution banning same-sex marriage?
Well, I don't support it. I think it is a state issue. I believe Senator Voinovich said the same thing today. And so that's good for Ohio. I don't think this is the issue that the voters want to debate and discuss this November.
Why did George Bush take this position?
I can't say that. I can't get in his head. I think the unfortunate thing about it is that, the president shows what his priorities are by the things he chooses to take on. And he made that a priority. And I don't think that's what the American people or the people of Ohio think is the priority. What they know the priority is how do we compete in the international economy in the 21st century? How do we have rising personal incomes? How do we have people creating good jobs and young people being able to have the opportunities for the future that we had when we were growing up? That's really the challenge. And so I'm glad it's not going to be an issue in the Ohio race. There is one issue in the Ohio race, and that is how do we get Ohio moving again? And that's what I'm ready to show people what the alternative is.
Senator, 547 Americans are dead in Iraq tonight, and over 3,000 more have been wounded since hostilities began. The President, George Bush, has said mission accomplished. Do you believe him?
No, and I think, Bob, that mission accomplished statement, which came before most of these young men were killed, the majority of them were killed, is what was wrong. There's been a lot of talk about they were wrong on intelligence, on weapons of mass destruction. But the real problem is that they thought it was going to be easy. They really believed that, the expatriates would go back to Iraq and be welcomed as leaders, that the oil revenue would pay for the war. All of these things they believed. And so I think that what we need is leaders who understand that the struggle against terrorism is going to be a long, difficult struggle, that war is difficult, and that we have to have an aggressive posture to chase these terror cells all over the world. that we can't succeed by tying down all of our armed forces in one or two locations for a long period of time, and that's what they've done. So I think that they miscalculated. They don't understand the true nature. We need a long-term strategy, and that's what I'm going to bring to this campaign and this debate.
Would you have supported the war in Iraq?
I would not have, for the reason that I just said. But we are where we are today, and so the real question is, where do we lead in the future? I would bring the National Guard home. The National Guard should be our Homeland Security Force. That's what they were always designed to be. I would then beef up our military in a way that creates a mobility. What we need is a military unit that is mobile, that has the light armaments, that has the intelligence capability, the linguistics capability to chase these terrorist cells all over the world, because that's where they are. You know, the fact that we haven't caught Osama bin Laden yet is an indicator, not that I could do it better, that somebody else could do it better, it's an indicator of the level of difficulty of catching and wiping out these cells. Al-Qaeda is rising back up in some of the places where we have abandoned it. So it's an issue of what is the proper aggressive, proactive strategy. I believe that I can articulate that for people. I think Ohio needs a senator who's engaged in the debate and who's not just really, frankly, a rubber stamp for the administration, both on their economic policies and on their foreign policies.
The world has changed, obviously, since September 11, 2001. And Senator Fingerhut, I want to ask you, what do you think is America's role in the Middle East?
Well, I actually believe that the president is saying the right things, but I don't believe that he's following it up with policies that support it. The president says, appropriately, that the only true safeguard against the rise of terrorism, and you know, if I could take it aside for a second, terror is not an enemy. Terror is the tactic used by an enemy. The enemy happens to be a very dangerous strain of fundamentalist Islam who use violence and believe that the use of violence is appropriate to attack free and democratic societies. They're attacking secular societies. And so we need to stamp that out. And the president is right that one of the fundamental ways to do that is to have free and open societies. The problem is that we're not supporting free and open societies all over the Middle East. We need to be supporting the opposition movements in Iran. We need to be linking up with free people all over the world, giving them the financial support, the communication support, the satellite support, not just the military support. And the only thing this administration has offered is a military solution. I believe, as I've already said, that an aggressive military posture that goes after terror cells is an important component of what we have to do. But we also need a diplomatic and communications strategy to truly build freedom and be the nation that people do want to emulate in the world.
Senator Fingerhut, I want to also ask you, Alan Greenspan last week recommended that Social Security amounts to future retirees, Social Security benefits to future retirees, that they be reduced.
Right.
Is Alan Greenspan misguided?
Bob, this is the most important issue that we're facing right now at the federal level, and this is where I think that people can compare Senator Voinovich's and my record straight on. The truth of the matter is that the problem that Alan Greenspan outlined, which is that there's going to be a rising cost of Social Security in the next decade as the baby boomers retire, is a problem that we've known for decades. And when I went to Congress in 1993, we hadn't balanced the budget of this country in 25 years. And so we were draining the Social Security surplus that had been built up to protect Social Security for the future. And I stood up, and so did many others, and we fixed that problem. And people like George Voinovich, who was then the governor of Ohio, said, oh, you're wrong to do this. But we tackled the problem. We set the country back on a course of fiscal responsibility so that the deficits turned into surpluses. When they first turned into surpluses, the Democratic Party said very clearly that the job here is to pay down the debt, restore the Social Security surplus, and protect it for the future. Unfortunately, the Republican Party's position was to take that surplus and to drain it away through tax cuts that I don't believe really were beneficial or needed for the economy. So the critical moment that we need to debate in this election, I think it's unfortunate that Senator Voinovich doesn't want to debate, because this is the debate we need to have for the people of Ohio, is that in 2001, when we had a $350 billion surplus in this country,
we now have a $521 billion deficit, and that comes out to $5,000 per household.
That's right.
But
the point, I think the critical moment that people need to know is that in 2001, when we had that surplus, we weren't yet it was before 9/11, it was before the war in Iraq, so none of those things were issues. It was a pure question of priorities. We had a once-in-a-generation opportunity to preserve Social Security, and then to invest here at home, rebuilding our industrial base, making education affordable, dealing with the healthcare crisis. And instead, what did George Bush and George Voinovich do? They passed a $1.5 trillion tax cut, eliminating the estate tax, lowering taxes on the most successful Americans. That was a pure statement of priorities. I believe that was the moment when the opportunity to fix Social Security was missed. So I'm going to protect Social Security. I'm not going down the road down Greenspan's going down, but we're in that situation because of the policies of the president and because Senator Voinovich supported those policies. And now we need people like me who have had the courage and the record and showed that we're willing to take the difficult decisions that are necessary to preserve and protect Social Security and rebuild our country and establish fiscal responsibility so that the world and the investors know this country pays its bills. We don't pass it on to our children, and we don't undermine the security and stability of this country.
Senator, while you have been in the Congress and while you were in the Ohio State Senate, you have been recognized as one of the leading advocates of gun control, handgun control here in Ohio. What do you tell voters here in Ohio who are outdoor sportsmen, who enjoy collecting weapons these weapons as a hobby, who are very concerned with your record of trying to eliminate handguns here in Ohio?
Well, first of all, that's a wrong statement, Bob. I've never tried to eliminate handguns. I've been in public life for 15 years. People can check my record, and they can check every bill that I've ever introduced. This is actually another one of these issues where there's really not a difference between the candidates this year. I've said there are many issues on which Senator Voinovich and I agree. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I believe people have the right to keep and bear arms for their personal safety, for sport, for hunting, for any reason. But they also have a responsibility to keep those guns safely. And so, for example, what I do not support and haven't supported, as Governor Voinovich didn't support when he was the governor, allowing people to carry concealed weapons, loaded weapons on the street or keeping them in their car. That would not be safe. We have, and I believe that people who keep guns in their homes have to keep them safely away from children. But the right to keep and bear arms is sacrosanct. It's in the Ohio Constitution. It's in the United States Constitution. And anyone who looks objectively at the record knows that the issues that I've pursued are to make sure that the basic safeties that the public wants, background checks, training requirements, are truly in place.
I want to talk about the presidential campaign. The polls have closed. We're going to be looking at some numbers at the top of the hour. Early returns, absentee ballots that are coming into the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. I want to talk about the presidential campaign coming up. John Kerry, are you going to be pleased to have him come to Ohio and be on the same Democratic ticket of John Kerry?
Absolutely. You know, I heard you actually ask this question in the last segment, and I think that my campaign is going to help John Kerry, and I think John Kerry's campaign will help mine. We're out there bringing in people all over the state. I just was on a 10-day, 45-county bus tour, as I mentioned to you. We have over 3,500 donors, many of whom haven't been part of the process in many years. And we're building a grassroots network. We're showing people that there's an alternative for the future of this state. You know, I really don't think this election is about Democrats versus Republicans, incumbents versus challengers. I really believe this is about the past versus the future. This is about making Ohio great again. This is about showing people a vision of the future. I think what people have seen of our elected officials in Ohio and from Ohio and Washington, including tragically Senator Voinovich, is that they're looking to try to get past the next election instead of trying to build the foundation for the next generation. And you know, in Ohio, that's how we became great the first time, because we had leaders who invested for the long run. You know, my grandparents came to Ohio from Europe between World War I and World War II. My father went back and fought in the war and came back to Ohio. I went away to college, came back to Ohio. My wife and I are raising our son not 3 miles from where I grew up. That was the Ohio story. Each generation thought they were ahead. But as I travel Ohio now, and you ask people, do they think their children or grandchildren will have the same opportunity, that they really are doubting it. And that's what this election's about. If John Kerry can give them a sense that the country is going to be better for their children and grandchildren, I think they'll support him, and I'm going to give them that sense for the state of Ohio.
Senator, you and George Voinovich were in public office at the same time here in Cuyahoga County. You know George Voinovich. I'm sure that you've passed across more than once. The sense that a lot of people have about George Voinovich is that he is, in fact, an honest, decent public servant.
And I agree. And that's why this issue is...
And you're saying he doesn't deserve re-election?
I don't, because I think that his ideas really are the ideas of the past. I think, with all due respect to Senator Voinovich, who has been a great leader in the history of Ohio, that people know that we're not heading in the right direction. When you look at the issue of Ohio's economic growth over the last decade and a half, and you see that the average incomes have declined relative to the rest of the country. You see that other states around us, and this isn't, again, Republican and Democrats, Republican governors in Michigan and Pennsylvania help move their states forward and invest in the future of their economy, create good jobs for their young people. We're the second worst state in the nation in terms of our young people leaving. We're losing our best and the brightest. When I was in Bucyrus this week, somebody said to me, Senator, we need the next Thomas Edison in Ohio. And I said, you're right. The problem is we don't know which one of our young people is going to be the next Thomas Edison. So we need to keep them all here, keep our talent here. And that's why people know that it's time for new leadership. They respect Senator Voinovich as I do. They thank him for his service as I do. But they know that it's time for new leadership. It's time for the future. And that's what we're going to provide them. A friend of mine said to me that she felt like that she moved here from Missouri, which, of course, is the show-me state. She felt like she had moved from the show-me state to the good-enough state. I think people feel like we've been settling for good enough too long, and that good enough isn't good enough in the 21st century. If you're settling for good enough, you're falling behind. That's what Ohio's been doing. It's time to be great again.
I'm Bob Conkling. We'll be right back with our special guest, State Senator Eric Fingerhut. He faces George Voinovich in the fall election for U.S. Senator. We'll be back with Senator Fingerhut in just a moment.
ATM machine and a couple of...
Welcome back to this live election night coverage. It is primary election night, March 2nd, 2004, and with us here in studio is State Senator Eric Fingerhut, who faces George Voinovich in the fall election. He will be the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate. 575-0403 is the number to call on the bottom of the screen if you want in on our conversation. And, Senator, I want to ask you a question with regard to the Patriot Act that was passed 45 days after 9/11. And there are some folks in Washington and locally here in Ohio who are concerned about some provisions of that bill, supported by Senator Voinovich. The Patriot Act gives, as I understand, U.S. agents more latitude in tracking down spies, or tracking down citizens and non-citizens in the United States who may be potential terrorists. It allows the FBI access to certain records from hospitals, libraries, from businesses, bookstores even. 250 local communities across the nation have passed resolutions opposing the Patriot Act. Would you work to repeal the Patriot Act or strengthen it as a U.S. Senator?
Well, first of all, I think there are many things in the Patriot Act that were very important and that I support. But as with anything that's passed in a rush after a major crisis like 9/11, there's bound to be some mistakes in it. And that's why I don't really understand Senator Voinovich saying he doesn't want to revisit it. They also did something very smart. They made it expire. They set an expiration date. So the real question is, when it comes ready to expire, do we renew it as is, or do we make some modifications based on what we've learned over the last few years? My position is that we should make some of the modifications that have become apparent. We need to give our law enforcement the necessary tools to do what they have to do to identify terrorists who are infiltrating America. But we also need to maintain our basic civil liberties. You need to go to a judge and ask for a warrant. You need to show probable cause. And those kinds of things, we need to, when we hold people, we need to make sure they have access to lawyers. Those kinds of things are so basic in America that I think that including them in a revised Patriot Act when it comes up for renewal anyway will reassure people that we really do have the right balance. We're going to go after terrorists infiltrating America, but we're going to protect our civil liberties. We can make that balance here 3 years after 9/11.
Do you think the Patriot Act was a rush to judgment?
No, I don't blame anybody at the time. I think that you had to get something passed. There were some necessary tools. But the fact of the matter is that there were some mistakes in it. There were some things that, on retrospect, aren't necessary. We had this problem in politics that people need to know about me, because I'm going to be their next United States Senator, I believe. And I'm not into the blame game. I'm tired of people pointing fingers all the time. I think people made their best judgment at the time. But I also think that we don't need public officials who are so defensive about what they did 3 years ago that they're not willing to say, you know, let's make some of the necessary adjustments. And we need to listen to people. You know, I've been out listening to people all over the state of Ohio. People know that there's a sensible middle ground on these issues. And I think it's unfortunate that the officials in Washington, including Ohio's, and the president haven't really been listening on this issue. There's a way to balance these concerns, and that's what I would do.
The FCC has levied fine against Howard Stern. I believe he's out of New York City. And of course, all of us here in Cleveland know Howard Stern. 6 markets have taken him off the air. Should Howard Stern, in your view, be taken off the air here in Ohio?
You know, I have to confess that I don't really listen to Howard Stern, so I'm not the expert on this. You know, I generally think that we should care about the tone of what our children listen to. I'm a parent of a 2-year-old. I care a lot about what things he's going to be exposed to. I think our young people are exposed to too much violence on television and the movies. But I also believe that the way to make that happen is through the marketplace working. And parents should protect their children from buying, from seeing, and they shouldn't buy things for their children if they don't want to. And if the marketplace doesn't work for that, then I mean, if there's not a market for the product, they won't pursue it. I think these radio stations have decided that they're losing more than they're gaining from that show, and that's the marketplace at work.
And Senator, what about Jerry Springer? He's still active in the Ohio Democratic Party. Does he have a home in Ohio politics?
Well, he's a very talented guy, and I welcome anybody.
He's a talented person.
He's got talent, yeah, and I welcome anybody who's supporting the Democratic Party. Obviously, I didn't like his show, but that's something that I made clear.
We do have a caller on the line for State Senator Eric Fingerhut. Caller, let's go to Brian here in Cleveland. Brian, go ahead.
Good evening, Senator. I have a question about your campaign.
Yes.
I've been a lifelong Democrat, and I've watched as our state has fallen behind really under 2 Republican governors who have won 4 terms. And I've seen our Democratic Party isn't very energized. What are you going to do to energize our party and also to reach out to independents?
Well, it's a great question. We just spent the last 10 days, as I mentioned, 45 county bus tour, over 100 different stops. And because, of course, we were leading up to the primary, we were primarily meeting with Democratic officials, getting them excited about, and activists, getting them excited about our campaign. As I said, we've received support, financial support, from over 3,500 different people around the state. The average donation is over $100. I've said to people basically that this campaign is in your hands. If you lift me up, if you hold me on your shoulders, carry me on your shoulders, I can make this happen. So we're going to do that. And then we're also reaching out to independent swing voters, Republicans. I'm going to publish a book this spring that's going to lay out my agenda in detail, 50 great ideas to move Ohio forward. Good enough isn't good enough anymore. I think people all over the state, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, know we've got to get Ohio moving again. I truly believe this race is not going to come down to Democrats versus Republicans. It's going to come down to the past versus the future. How do we get Ohio moving? How do we become great again? How do we make the products and services that are going to sell around the world? How do we rebuild our industrial base? How do we keep our best and brightest here and attract the best and brightest from around the world to come to Ohio and build and invest? That's the future. Everyone understands it, whatever party, and that's the message I'm carrying.
Brian, are you still there?
Yes, sir. Senator, can we do that, though, with the current tone of the legislature in Columbus, the way the Republicans have been divisive and tried to divide Ohioans over taxes, over education? They've tried to pit cities against suburbs. Can we really take that divisiveness and make Ohio a showplace for the nation?
You bet we can, but we need new leaders. You mentioned the General Assembly in Columbus. Clearly, they spend their time on the wrong issues. We haven't had a special session about the economy. We haven't had a special session about education. They cut higher education. We're in the top 5 in terms of the expense of higher education. We're driving our young people away. So you bet we can, but we need new leaders, and that's what this campaign's about. As I said earlier, people know that they need new leaders. They don't yet know the alternative, and that's what this campaign is. So I hope you'll join me, and we'll get the message out to Ohioans. and I think we're going to make a difference for Ohio this November.
Senator Eric Fingerhut. He is the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate against George Voinovich this fall. Senator, thank you for joining us tonight here on our live election night coverage. Senator Eric Fingerhut. Now, when we come back in just a moment, we'll take a look at some early results. We do have some absentees. Tim Hagan has jumped into an early lead in the race for Cuyahoga County Commissioner against Tim McCormick. He has snared 52% of the absentee vote. I'm Bob Coughlin. We'll be right back.
Do you love dogs? Would you like to help a visually impaired person gain independence? Guiding Eyes for the Blind is looking for caring volunteers to raise future guide dog puppies. You'll raise the pup for a year and a half, teach it manners, and expose it to everyday life activities, and then return it for advanced guide dog training. Guiding Eyes provides local support. Experience the joy of helping a visually impaired person begin a new life with a guide dog you helped raise. To learn more, call Guiding Eyes at 866-GEB-LABS. That's 866-432-5227.
Adelphia high-speed internet is faster than NASA's connection to the probe. True high-speed internet service allows you to search the web quickly, and there's no more dialing up. Plus, with Adelphia high-speed internet, you'll enjoy CD-quality music, video, and movie trailers. Call now and get the first 5 months for only $24.95 per month. Plus, get a free easy self-installation kit. Call Adelphia today for a deal that's out of this world.
I got a new baby sister. She hasn't come home yet. Got born too soon.